it would not surprise me that between now and the next presidential election that some team, some player that is really big is like, I'm not doing XYZ until these things happen. And it's going to cause more conversation, more of a deep dive, and it's going to piss a lot of people off, very candidly. But there are things that we should be talking about anyway.
Welcome, fam. This is Courtney Russell Jr., and I'm here with my co-host, Emily Browker.
Welcome to Humanize.
We are two Americans with totally different backgrounds and life experiences.
We're coming together on this podcast to dive right at the heart of the three things that shut down tough conversations about race: culture, power, and ego.
The stories you are about to hear are meant to humanize those deeply involved in social justice. Welcome to the work, y'all. Let's get it.
We are coming to you live today from the Museum of Boulder, and this is our fourth and final of a four-part series on Black culture in Boulder. And so just a little bit of context on this series, and then we'll introduce our guest here. So it was sometime in 2023, and I live in Boulder, Courtney lives in Estes, and we're starting to see some things emerging in Boulder regarding Black culture and the Black experience here. And we wanted to learn more. So the things that we're seeing was there was the Museum of Boulder's Proclaiming Black History exhibit. There was national news on Coach DaWon Sanders. There was the opening of the CU Center for African and African American Studies. There was the success of the film This Is Not Who We Are. All of these things were pointing to like, what's happening? What's getting drummed up here? So we reached out to partner with the Museum of Boulder with the intent of exploring this through a live podcast series. And luckily, they were game. So this is the fourth and final installation of that series, and we're honored to have DaWon Baker here with us today. So welcome to Humanize.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yay. So we're joined by DaWon today, and he is the Associate Athletic Director for Impact and Strategic Engagement at CU Boulder. And since arriving at 2021 is when you came to CU.
Okay. May 2021.
DaWon has led the charge with diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Buff Athletics. So supporting student athletes, coaches, and staff, and creating a more inclusive team culture. So he also leads the strategic planning department for the entire athletics department. Our strategic planning for the entire athletics department, connecting departments and teams across multiple disciplines within CU athletics and aligning their goals and outcomes to help move CU athletics forward. And before coming to CU, he was the first ever director of diversity and inclusion in athletics at University of Nebraska. He's also a former NCAA intern and co-founder of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council for Excellence, pronounced DICE. Yes,
DICE.
DICE. And a lifelong advocate for justice in sports. So today we're diving into the history of DEI in athletics and what it takes to shape culture from inside and how sports and activism intersect on and off the field. So before we dive into that piece, I just wanted to hear more about your story and like, were there certain life experiences or paths that led to you focusing in on this piece?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Thanks for being here. And thanks for y'all for coming. So hopefully we can have a really good conversation. A little bit about my background, my story. Is there an event that sparked it? Absolutely. Other than childhood happenings that happened to, a young Black kid from St. Louis, the thing that really kind of sparked it for me was really August 2014. What you see in the national news is, if you know the name, Michael Brown, Ferguson, Missouri. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Ferguson is a subdivision, if you will. The street where Michael Brown is killed is 9 minutes from where my pops lives, back home in St. Louis. And so you see the strife that's happening around the community. I was a senior at the University of Missouri at the time. We had a lot of students who were from that area. And so what I saw, it was also August, so people are going back to school, right? And so what you saw was a lot of people that are from that area are coming back to school and they're talking, what's going on? What are we doing? Are we protesting? Do things need to happen? And there were a lot of conversations that students were trying to have with faculty, staff, administration, all the things. And I wouldn't say it fell on deaf ears because it's not true, but it really wasn't acted upon in the way that we thought it should happen. And so I would say at this point, I'm kind of, I wouldn't say 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but I was interested in social justice, but I wasn't invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started to see for my friends who were like deep in it is the way it was impacting them, what not hearing their voices did. And I saw what it did to our campus, right? So I worked in the rec center. I did research as an undergraduate student. I was a former track and field athlete. And so all the spaces that I was operating in, I was kind of seeing the campus kind of pull apart. And so I saw what not having these conversations did. And I was like, yeah, I don't like that. This is not something I really want to be a part of where, one, we can't have these conversations, but two, where it's either frowned upon or it just isn't really met, right? And so...
Can you say more about what not having those conversations
Yeah.
did?
So the very first thing I remember is I worked in the ticket office for Mizzou Athletics. And usually this is the person that you come up to say, hey, I want to buy a ticket to the basketball game or whatever. And so I'm the person at the front window. And so I'm sitting there one day and I wasn't at the window. I was on a cubicle kind of off to the side. And one of my then teammates, colleagues, et cetera, is like scrolling through the now called Twitter. I mean, it used to be called Twitter, now X, whatever you want to call it. But it's like, man, do y'all see the thing that's happening in, where's it called? Somewhere in Missouri. I'll say it's Ferguson, right? And had an opinion like, well, probably should have complied, right? And I'm like, there's probably a little bit more to that story that we don't know. That was the first thing. And that was at this point, late August, early September. And as I went through the rest of that fall, people at work are talking about it. Professors are talking about it. There are demonstrations on campus. And one of the things I remember very vividly was there was a platform called Yik Yak, which is like an anonymous platform where people can send a message for people to see. So you broadcast a message, everybody sees it, but you don't see who did it, right? And there was a protest that was happening in the student center. And there were students who were essentially enacting a die-in. So they go into the student center, they fall on the floor, and it creates, this, I don't want to say diversion, but it creates an opportunity for people to like stop and pause and like, why are there 100 people sitting on the floor, right? And they were enacting somebody basically being dead on the floor, being shot down by the police, all these things. And there was a Yik Yak message that said, couple things. The one that kind of caught me, I'm like, whoa, this is kind of out there. One said, get the fuck out of here with all this stuff. We don't care about that. I'm just trying to eat lunch, right? So to me, it's pretty tame. But the thing that kind of caught me was our Black Culture Center at Mizzou is across the street from the student center, 3-minute walk. And at that time, there were some damage that was happening to the places in St. Louis. People will call it rioting, looting, all these things. And somebody put a message on Yik Yak, that said, maybe we should burn down a Black Culture Center so they know how it feels. And I'm like, oh, this is not, I ain't with that, right? And so very, very clear that there are opposing opinions. People can have their own opinions. I think some opinions are wrong, but it was very clear that these conversations were not happening in an effective way. And it started to really kind of pull at the campus community. What I also saw specifically at the same demonstration was at the time I was done competing. I was a track and field walk-on athlete at Mizzou. I would see former athletes that I knew from other sports who would come to these protests and come to these demonstrations, come to these conversations, and they would hide in the back with their hoods on. And so I'm like, and then I had seen it a couple of times. So I'm like, okay, there's people who want to talk or they want to see what's going on, but there's no voice or they don't feel comfortable to show their face. Maybe they don't want to be in the spotlight. There's a lot of different reasons, but I saw that firsthand. And couple all that with, at the time, I'm also doing research as a student. I was in this thing called McNair Scholars Program. It's a federally funded grant program to help students to pursue academia, specifically first-gen, minority, or lower SES students to get into academia. And so I was doing research specifically on Black athletic directors. And at this time, as a senior, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing all these things that are happening in my personal life of people who have these perspectives, opinions of what's happening around race, police brutality. I'm seeing what's happening on our campus of us not having these conversations or not having a directive as to how to have them. And it's kind of pulling away at, the fabric of how people are interacting in the university. And I'm studying all this stuff in sports, specifically about how there's a lack of specifically professional Black people that are in athletics who are running or leading these departments. And so it creates this unique blend, right, of all the things that I'm interested in and pursuing. At the time, I thought, this is not really a career. I'm probably going to have to go be a professor, right? Go get a PhD. We'll see how that goes. And still have a plan to do that, but it's kind of pushed a little bit. And the thing that really kind of pulled me in is I go off to grad school. And in my orientation, I went to the University of Central Florida. The first speaker I hear from is a good friend and I won't say mentor, kind of mentorish, but really good friend now. His name is Vince Pearson. At the time, he was the director of diversity and inclusion for minor league baseball. And he was the first speaker that we heard. And I'm like, what the hell kind of job is that? I didn't even know that existed. I didn't even know that existed, right? Yeah. And so he's like, yep, we graduated from the same grad program. He was 2 years removed, so still a little bit younger too. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, I graduated from the program and got hired into minor league baseball to build this strategy out. This job didn't exist before. And after talking to him, I find out like, oh, there's somebody at the NBA that does this, at the NFL, at the MLS, at the NCAA. So I'm like, oh, there's a real pathway of what this looks like. I didn't know that until I got into grad school and really explored it though, right? And so from that point, that's where I'm like, okay, there's some work that is happening and I want to be a part of it. What does that look like? And I can get more into the details of like how. That's probably way longer than we have time to, but that was kind of the planting of the seed to get into this type of work. And slowly but surely throughout grad school, my first job, my second job, et cetera, really just started to align people who either were doing that work or had connections to that work. Mm-hmm. And my background kind of just fitted, right? Being a former student athlete, but also doing research in undergrad around, diversity, equity, and inclusion in sport, race in sport. Then going to a grad school where my program director created a report card on racial or gender hiring for athletics. And so I participated in, was a co-author for one of those research reports. I participated in trainings myself. I facilitated trainings when I was a grad student, right? And so all these experiences is like, okay, these jobs don't exist a whole lot, but if anybody is equipped for it, it's me, right? And just really kind of collected those experiences and thankfully found myself that when opportunities were arising, and again, the pool isn't deep, but there's somebody that's in it. And I was one of the people that was in it and was able to really kind of chart a career in and what this looks like from a intersection of sport, diversity, culture, engagement, inclusion, all those types of things. So,
damn. I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, really, thank you for that work, because what kept coming up for me as you were speaking was shut up and dribble.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like we're good enough to entertain, but we're not good enough to stand for shit.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I have a huge problem with that because I think sports is a unifier.
Absolutely.
Sports is something that kind of channels certain frustrations, kind of gives you a focus that you may not have. And I love the fact that sports can be a way to uplift your community.
Absolutely.
And I just don't like the way that it is one of the only ways that people think that people of color can become successful.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah.
And so when you are in things other than sports, you are in law or you are in medicine or you in engineering, it's like, why are you here? Go play basketball and entertain us.
Yeah.
We can give you $100 million. But I was always of the frame of mind, like if a person's getting $100 million to play that, how much is the owner getting paid?
Right. Yep.
And how much is the person who runs this team getting paid? And how much is all of the other individuals that we don't even know about getting paid so that we can be entertained?
Yeah.
We got to be more than that.
Yeah.
No, please.
What I try to use my positionality, and when I say positionality, I don't mean like role. I mean like my proximity to the student athletes and people that I serve. I try to use my position in that perspective of kind of reframe the thinking of like, if you love and care about sport, cool, I'm with you, right? Play as long as you can, make a living as long as you can. At some point, it's going to stop. But there are also ways that we can utilize sport one, either to transition, or two, to bring attention to things that we really need to be paying attention to, right? And so one thing that I think of specific to that story is I still think of undergrad. One of the things that kind of triggered in my mind of like, oh, athletes can even be connected to things, even if they aren't studying law, medicine, and all those types of things, right? Is I think of back in 2015, at this point I graduated, I went on to grad school, but Mizzou football went on strike. And what specifically the Black players did is they came together and they said, hey, our campus is facing a lot of issues specifically to how Black students are being treated on campus. And we're not going to play until the president of the university addresses it. That turned into him stepping down. I think it was 9 days later. I'll have to recheck that. But the underlying piece of that was there was a safety on the team who just so happened to be in the best fraternity in the world, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And not biased. His line brother was the student body president, who as student body president was getting all this flack on campus, being called the N-word, all these types of things, right? And he used his positionality to his line brother, who was a safety on the team, and started to talk to some of the other athletes like, hey, y'all, this is what's going on our campus, because they were removed. And they said, well, we can do something about that. Let us get involved. That turns into a couple conversations. That turns into them going on strike. That turns into a university president stepping down, right? And specific to that point of shut up and dribble, like that was the first time I seen in real time, like, oh, this is what can happen if you are, one, committed to a cause, but two, like really organizing yourself and driving towards something, right? And so I don't use that story with the athletes often, but I do try to use my positionality again of like, look, I work in sports, so I can't say I'm perfect, but I do know what sport can do for you if you use it and see it in a lens that everybody else doesn't. And so how can we use the space that we're in now? How can we use all this money, this influence, these eyeballs to really drive at stuff that we think really needs to be changed, right? And so if we can do that on a consistent level, I think it really can drive the change that we want to see in the world, because people pay attention to sport. I love sports, but I know at the end of the day, there are bigger things at play. That doesn't mean we can't use sport to bring the attention and the eyeballs and the awareness to the stuff that we really need to be paying attention to.
100%.
So yeah, but
that was dope, because we see, I mean, Kaepernick, you know, when he did what he did, which is amazing. Yep. I mean, his whole career was derailed, man. And he was a rising star in his own right, you know. And so to see, the thing about white supremacy, it has a great job of distracting.
It does.
Right? Yep. And so if I pay you enough money, you should be happy enough and content to play your role in the perpetuation of white supremacy. Yep. You have a role in that. You do. And then when you step out of line, after I've given you the money, if I'm the person that is oppressing you, how dare you? Right. And now it's looking like you're not appreciative. You're one of the good Black people that have been blessed to make LeBron type money. Yep. You know, and so when you stand for something on the platform that is sports, it's just like on the platform that is medicine. Yeah. You don't have to practice another day in your life, but if you are addressing issues, you're healing. Yeah. If you're playing sports and you're blessed to make that kind of money and you're standing for something because of the platform that you have, you're doing so much more. You've now transcended sports in such a way that that's a problem. Yeah. Yeah. And you can't be that high up. Yeah. And that's the issue I have with not sports per se, but the system that is in place where I'm going to pay someone millions of dollars while individuals can't even eat. Yeah. Yep. Right? Yep. Just because, and again, I try to knock someone's God-given ability to play football, to play basketball, to play baseball. I love that. Yep. However, if an issue is there as a healthcare, that's bigger than us. That's your mom's. That's your child. That's your wife, you know? And so I think that you now have an obligation to serve in that way because of a blessing or a talent that has been God-given to you.
Yeah. So I think where we are right now in the year, I won't say year 2025, but this is the first time in history that, at least from what I've seen and studied, that athletes can actually say something and it not be met consistently with very negative connotation. What's the word? Vitriol.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And where it's like a real nasty response, right? Because if you look historically of athletes speaking out, specifically Black athletes speaking out, right? When you get into the Alis, the Tommy Smith, the John Carlos, Harry Edwards is a sociologist. He's not an athlete, but when you look at the height of specifically athletes saying things around civil rights movement, post-civil rights movement, the immediate response is bam, backlash, right? And so that kind of planted for all the current athletes and I would say recently finished athletes that 80s, 90s, 2000s, right? Where they were seen as, we can't do this because we just started getting paid and we can't participate in this. Yeah. That's what leads to the banning of Ali going to jail for standing up versus Vietnam and the banning of Tommy Smith and John Carlos for doing a Black Power salute. Yeah. That is directly tied to Michael Jordan when they say, hey, MJ, do you want to endorse so-and-so? And he says, Republicans buy sneakers too, right? Yeah. All of that is directly correlated.
Or OJ saying, I'm not Black, I'm OJ.
I'm not Black, I'm OJ, right? All those things are tied together. And I don't think most of our society really sees and understands that.
Yeah.
And I would say not until the most recent I can think of to really be at that level, say something and not get destroyed for it is LeBron, right? He's the first athlete that, again, I've seen recently to where you reach those levels and he says a thing. And of course, you get people saying stuff on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, et cetera, right, who don't agree. But even you go to Cap was 2016.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, even when Cap did it, it cost him his career, right? Yeah. It's not until we get into 2019, 2021, where people are starting to really use their voice and they're not being yanked or their livelihood being taken away. And it still happens, but just not at that mega level, right? I can still think of conversations that I had back when I was at Nebraska of talking to our athletes in the thick of 2020 that have these specific ideas, perspectives, opinions of, hate police brutality, hate white supremacy, I want to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, all right, cool. We got this rally next week. You want to speak? Nah, I'm good. Why? Well, DaWon, I'm trying to get drafted this year. And if I come out and say this, who's to say that I'm going to get right? This might knock my draft grade right. Like, these are real life conversations I've had with athletes that I work with and serve. And so we as a collective community, society, et cetera, we still have a lot of work to do to just empower our athletes to even say something. And so that's what I try to do in a lot of my day job, in a lot of my day-to-day work with the athletes, is just try to, one, give resources, but two, give them the experience and opportunity to be like, yo, if you want to do this, we can help. I can help you. And I can give you what I've seen I'm not going to say the right way because I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I can tell you the ins and outs and what's going to be met with certain responses and what's going to get your point across or what's not going to get your point across or how to talk to these people or how not to talk to these people, who's going to move the needle for you. Those are things I try to share because I want them to be empowered with enough information that if you really believe you want to say something, stand for something, bet, let's do it. But I can't just have you jump out there because I've seen too many times where athletes have crashed and burned because somebody is upholding white supremacy too much to actually listen to what you're trying to say, right? And so I try to take that part of the role really, really serious and try to have those conversations with our athletes all the time, should they bring them to me. And even inspire them to just even think about it more on a consistent basis too. So
what does the protection look like? What does that mean? When you say protections for using their voice, what is that?
It depends. The immediate thing I jump to is, when I say protection, I mean, how can you say these things again without seeing a scrolling on your Twitter and seeing a death threat, right? Yeah. Or if you say this and now mysteriously somebody wants to pull your scholarship, right? What are ways that we can make sure that, again, if you're willing to say this and you feel strongly about it, that you take the steps that once you say it, you know, I'm good, my scholarship's going to be kept, or somebody's actually going to read it and know exactly what I'm talking about and not just call me out and say I'm being racist even though I'm Black, those types of things. and also just even how to navigate the system. So I can point to specific times where in my career where an athlete has said, I want to do this and I want to say this. And I'm like, I hear you and I agree, but if you do it this way, it might derail what you're trying to do. People are going to lose the message. So you have to be aware of, if you do it this way, let's try to make sure that you've taken these precautions first so that even if you do get some blowback, you're not met with the severest punishment that might happen if you don't, right? And to me, that's protection, because at the end of the day, it's about whatever that student is experiencing and making sure that they can actually walk away from it at the end of the day. Because sometimes they don't get the opportunity to do that if they don't take the precautions that are necessary to protect themselves, protect their brand, protect the institution, all those types of things. Even at something as little as like, hey, I want to post this. I'm like, okay, cool. Have you talked to the coach or the AD yet about this? Nah, I just go post it. Maybe you should go talk to them first, because you might get some information that really shares why they're doing this or why they feel this way. So even just protect them in that sense of like, hey man, just be a critical thinker of like what the steps are coming after that.
Yeah.
And for me, that's part of the protection mechanism too.
I'm curious if you could speak to kind of like the current moment in time. And, I see people online saying like, hey, if all the athletes stood up and said you have to keep DEI within the universities, they would probably do it. Kind of like the situation that you were describing with the president. How are you helping your athletes navigate this? And what do you see as the athletes' role in this?
Yeah. I think, to your point, I think that should work. I don't know with the current presidential administration. I think it will be met with a not so great response, but another conversation for another day. I think, similar to what Cordy was saying, I do think athletes have an obligation to participate and engage in this type of work. The level varies, right? I do also believe that, well, not actually, let me not say that. How do I help? One, give resources, give strategy, right? If there's a difference between I want to say something and I want to do something, there's also a difference between I just want to feel community and heard and I want to take action. So first, giving them those platforms, right? And giving them those opportunities, because I have a lot of athletes who will come to me or come to staff and are like, I have this problem. And the first thing I want to do is just let people know I have this problem. Okay, cool. Let's give you a space to do that, right? And after you do that, I might say, do you want to take it further? You want to do a little bit more? Some people will say yes. Some people are like, nah, I just wanted to kind of air that grievance out and I'm good. And so what I struggle with is I tend to want our athletes to kind of take it to the next level, but sometimes they don't always want that, right? And so trying to kind of balance that line of, I don't want to push you into something that you don't want to do. And if you're not really invested in it now, have us look in a certain way because you just kind of wanted to air this grievance, right? And so that's another way. Well, main way I support them is, one, give them a space to share, but two, ask those follow-up questions like, okay, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to take it to these levels? You want to escalate it? You want to bring awareness to it? What are we doing, right? And giving them the space to, one, figure that out. Where we are right now, again, I do think that athletes should participate, engage. I have said a couple times to athletes, staff that I work with, I got some staff in this room who can attest to this, that Missouri 2015 is bound to happen again. And it's bound to happen very quickly to where an athletic department, a student athlete, somebody is going to stand up and be like, nah, I ain't with this. Right. And it's going to catch the ear of somebody that's really important, that's going to put a pause to something. Right. I hope we don't have to get to the point that issue is forced, but I do think we will get there. And not necessarily see you. I just mean in general. It would not surprise me that between now and the next presidential election, that some team, some player that is really big is like, I'm not doing XYZ until these things happen. And it's going to cause more conversation, more of a deep dive, and it's going to piss a lot of people off, very candidly. But there are things that we should be talking about anyway, just very honestly. So,
listen to you. I'm wondering, like Title IX protects, like it says, what exactly Title IX says?
Title IX protects the, I had the specific verbiage somewhere in my head, but it essentially protects opportunity and education that cannot be infringed upon based on the status of race, sex, gender, etc. Most people see it as the law that really kind of opened the opportunity specifically for women's sports.
Yeah.
But the basis of it is you cannot discriminate on opportunities that you are giving based on sex. So if you have from an athletic perspective, a women's tennis team, you need to have a men's something team that balances out from a numbers perspective. If you have a men's golf team, you need to have a women's something perspective from a numbers perspective. Now, it's not always a one-to-one, but there's also a funding mechanism to it of like, there's a reason why there's no women's team that's as big as football, right? But what will end up happening is if there are 120 football players, there might be a rowing team that has 47. There might be a women's track team that has 56. There might be a volleyball team that has 30, right? And so they try to balance it out from a numbers perspective in that regard. But Title IX, the basis of it is trying to make sure that we protect the opportunity for really all people, but more aimed at gender, to have the opportunity to compete and get the same, not amount of resources, but at least equitable resources in regards to what they're doing.
Has that come under attack with the executive orders?
Yeah.
Is that like on the chopping block or like where's that?
To my knowledge, it hasn't been explicitly. I think the first, at least to me, the first domino that we see is the attack specifically on trans people participating in sport, right? When you start to hard and fast define what sex and gender is in sport from youth all the way to professional, it gets real difficult to see, for me, how we don't jump to something else after that. Of, hey, we can police who's doing this at these levels around these things. Who's to stop us to now going to, you have to be a certain race or a certain age or a certain status, stature, makeup, right? So again, I don't think it's been explicitly stated, but to me, that's the first domino, is really trying to eliminate trans people out of sport and eliminate trans people really out of our society. I think that's the first tipping point.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah.
I think is a distraction from what's next when you dealing with the immigration situation, and then you're dealing with how they're trying to redefine or rewrite history in such a way, or take history away altogether. I think they're just testing the water a little bit to see how far can I go with this ignorant shit without getting too much pushback. Because if you're a lawyer, law is law. Like, you know what I mean? It's like medicine is medicine. You can't. But if you're trying to change it, you have to see the lines right here. Let me go. And if that happens, okay, let me go. Because now he's talking about, again, I want to be president past the 4 year, the term, right? And so just imagine, I'm sure everyone around him knows that's a constitutional crisis, but what else has he done up until now that we thought a couple years back could never have happened? You know, and so I think sports is a gateway a lot of times because so many people appreciate it and love it. And if it can happen there, like you just said, where else can it not happen?
Exactly.
And then you start to attack education, right? You say, you can't speak about this at a school. You can't protest at a school when higher education has been like, historically,
the bedrock of
that's
protest,
what you do. You know, you learn how to think when you're in school and in higher education, especially. And now, and it was cool until it wasn't. Right. And so I think individuals like yourself are so needed because you are almost on a front line, because everyone can have a commonality in sports. Right. You're white, black, rich, poor. If you can play, you can play. No matter if your pop's got money or you don't. If you can dribble, if you can catch, if you can run, if you're quick, like I forgot that you were like that while we on the field. We're trying to win this ring, this cup, whatever. But if they address that is another way to bring division to the individuals that may have had a conversation around race. So if I'm on the field with a white guy who grew up looking at my skin like, the hell? Now, as we're winning this ring together, you may start to think, oh shit, he may not be as bad, you know? But if socially, if things are happening and now The distraction is the person next to you is either a victim or an oppressor. Now, again, now we got to fight.
Yep.
Now we got beef, so I think what you do is phenomenal and pivotal.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm curious if you've had to do any more interventions with team in terms of like creating inclusive team cultures with people speaking out more, and how you do that, how you sustain the trust that's needed within the team.
Yes. We, specifically at where I am now at CU, we actually haven't had a lot of instances with athletes wanting to at least publicly come out and talk about stuff. A lot of the work that I do, well, I won't say a lot, a decent amount of the work that I do though is working directly with our teams to either facilitate conversations or do workshops. And I can think of one team in particular that I worked with where I had a staff member come to me and say, hey, specifically getting back to this idea of trans people in sport. They're like, hey, it's impacting our sport. And I think our team has opinions, but we don't really know how to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Can you help us, right? And after talking to the staff member, I'm like, okay, give me a little bit more because I need some context in regards to what this might look like. And they're like, yeah, we had somebody within our sport that some people on our team know who had a very public kind of bout with, trans people participating at another institution in another state. But because we know this team, this sport really well, some people know who it was. Some people know people attached to it. And we've heard kind of like some talking in the locker room. And again, I think people are interested, but we don't really know how to talk about it. How do we do that? And I'm like, okay, so started to strategize. I talked to the coach, talked to the athletes. And what we ended up coming to was, and what I told the athletes and kind of enacting and creating this workshop was, you're going to have opinions. My job is not to change your opinion. What my job is to do is make sure that you have informed opinions, though. And so what we did with that specific team was like, we took the stuff that you were seeing on the news, specific about that sport and specifically trans people in that sport, and we broke out the sources themselves. And we took the sources to see what's credible and what's not. And as we did that, and I told the team as we were kind of dialoguing with one another, I'm like, again, I'm not here to change your opinion. Your opinion is yours. You are entitled to it. I might disagree with it, but I want you to think critically about forming an opinion, not specifically about this, but anything as being a college student, right? But what I do, again, want to make sure that you know about is where to verify sources, what's real and what's not, and to actually take this into consideration, because if you're getting bad information, it's going to help form bad opinions, right? And so just even equipping that team and those athletes with that then turns into how they're researching for other stuff. And if they're seeing that it's a viable source, right? Yeah. Or if it's an unbiased source. And so there's things that I share with them that they continue to use, not just in, the relationships with their teammates, but even in class of like, oh, if I'm doing a research paper, now I can drop this link in here to see if this is an unbiased source that I can now produce this paper about, right? And so it's about culture and engagement in DEI, but then again, it's
critical thinking.
Exactly,
too.
Right. And so a lot of the work that I try to do with our teams in those workshops and even just talking to our coaches is like, hey, at the end of the day, yes, my work is diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's culture building, it's team engagement, et cetera. But like at the core, I'm a strategist and a critical thinker.
Yeah.
I just see it in a very different lens than most people because of life experiences, training, education, all those types of things. But that's the framework I take into this work. Yeah. And that's the framework I take to our teams and really try to approach our coaches specifically of like, hey, there are some things that we're going to do and talk about that are very specific and that you've seen on the news around race, gender, sexuality, all those things. But my job is to help you think outside the box altogether. How can we do that and still achieve the goals that you say you have, but just do it in very different ways? And so I try to approach it in a lot of those ways too.
It's such a relief that someone's out there doing what you're doing. I appreciate that. There's so much misinformation and I'm not in touch with the youth these days. Yep. So I just really appreciate that's happening. And I imagine you're doing all that work and then you have the capacity to stay with it if it goes there, right? If it gets heated, and that's the skill set that a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to get near it, And so, absolutely. That's awesome.
Have you had a situation where you had to get real? Like, I want to know if you in the locker room and it starts to go crazy and someone says something or does something. Have you had one of those experiences that you can share? Like you had to, or you were called to have a cultural building time
Absolutely.
with individuals?
Absolutely.
Go.
Yes.
Let me hear
absolutely.
that, bro.
So the two that I am able to share is the best way I can explain. Because there's some stuff that I've been called about and I'm just like, don't call me and don't say this on the phone. We need to talk in person.
Don't.
But so there's two I can think of in particular where I was working with a team and the coach calls me. It was like, hey, this is in the midst of COVID. And the coach calls me. It's like, hey, I have a player on my team who is calling COVID the Chinese virus and is saying, fuck China. And they have a teammate who you can guess is Chinese and from China, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, this is not great. And so the coach is like, I won't say to their credit, but they're like outraged, like, can't stand for this. This is not okay. Kick them off the team. I'm like, no, you gotta slow down. We can't just kick them off the team. Because similar to the point that I was sharing with Emily, like, these are still students that at the end of the day are getting information from somewhere, and kicking them off the team is not really going to solve the problem. It's going to solve the problem in getting the person out the locker room, but this is still somebody that we need to make sure that they have information, right? And so that turned into, hey, so-and-so, you shouldn't say that. Here's why. Here's the data and the resources to back up why. And we also want to check to make sure that you're doing the necessary work to make sure that you don't do it again. So it essentially turned into kind of like a mini class, right? Of read this stuff, go through these documents. Here's all information, even rooted to even the World Health Organization as to why we don't call diseases by geographical names. Like there's documented years of research that says, here's why we should not do this, right? So even getting to that level of like, yes, this is about the fact that you basically insulted this person, but I still want you to have the information as to why you shouldn't be doing X, Y, Z. So that's one immediate thing that I can think about. And
wait, can I ask a question about that? Yep. How did the repair happen after that within the team?
The perpetrator, I guess you would say, essentially had to go through the team and model and show what they did wrong. And I don't want to say public apology. It was that, but that wasn't the point. But more so the follow-up and really the seeing of the change behavior of, hey, we're actually going to be watching to see. It's pretty easy not easy. We can tell in a public setting if you don't say it again, right? That's easy. But observing how you interact with your teammate now, the things that you're saying in group conversations, what you're saying on the bus, what you're saying at practice, those are all things that the coach monitored throughout the rest of the time to see, like, are you really actually seeping this into you?
Yeah.
And if not, we also got discretion that we can just send you home and, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want you to be a part of this team anymore, right? So that's an immediate one I could think of. Another one I could think of, it was with campus students. It wasn't with college athletes, but I used to do a workshop that is essentially kind of like a DEI 101, right? And I still do it on request, but I don't do it nearly as much as I used to, where what I would do is I would get people in a room. We would give them a statement, and the activity is called Take a Stand. You give them a statement, and if you agree with the statement, you go to the right of the room. If you disagree, you go to the left. If you're unsure, you go to the middle. And it would be something like, I'm trying to think of one of the statements we use. Well, of this specific example, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something around the effect of like, I should treat people based on their race, right? And so some people go to the right, some people go to the left, some people are in the middle. And I had this really well-meaning white kid from rural anywhere USA, and essentially says what a lot of people now know is like, hey, that's a no-no, you shouldn't say this. Like, oh yeah, I don't see color. I don't treat people based on that, right? Which I think is actually pretty tame compared to some of the stuff I have seen and read. But Of course, you get people like, wait, what? You said, no, don't say that, bro. I say, hey, let me ask you a follow-up question. Tell me about some of the things that were instilled in you. Like, tell me about some values that you have from your family. It's like, oh, my dad taught me treat people with respect, treat people with kindness, treat people with integrity, honesty. And, that's what I try to ascribe to. I said, okay, so let me give you a little bit of game. It's not that you don't see or treat people based on color. You treat people based on a value set, right? It's like, yeah. I'm like, so does it matter what the color is to treat people based on a value set? No. Cool. So next time, don't say, I don't see it. Because in reality, yes, you might not see it. But the difference is, if you tell that to me, I'm going to get pissed off because I'm black and I want you to know I'm black and I care about being black. But you can have that conversation and treat people absent of their color and not because or not because of their color and not see it. Because people see that as, you don't see my color, right? Not you don't treat me based on my color. Because I don't want people to treat me a certain way because I'm black either, but I do want you to appreciate and see the fact that I am, right? And so even doing that in real time with that individual student, but also with the students around, it gives them language and ways to actually be able to address it and be like, oh, okay, next time, because I also tell people to like, hey, man, if you jump down people's throats, sometimes it's not really going to work. Or it might get them to shut up, but that don't mean that they really are learning, right? And so I also think for myself, I like to consider myself to be an educator. And so I always try to take the lens of like, if people are saying XYZ or doing XYZ, how can we make sure they learn about what they're saying or learn about what they're doing so that they actually do get a chance to reflect on why it was wrong and bad compared to, I shouldn't do this no more. I shouldn't say this no more. So I'm just not going to do it. So
we're going to get back to the episode in just a moment, but we wanted to give a quick shout out to our supporters on Patreon, as well as our supporters who have bought our merch from our website. Our podcast is principally sustained and propelled by listeners like you. And we wanted to make sure you knew how to get on that train. So to support us on Patreon, please go to the Patreon page and look up the Humanize podcast. There we have some exclusive content that we haven't released to the wider public, as well as ways to engage with the community. And if you want to check out some of the Humanized merch, the t-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, and different things, go to our website, thehumanizedpodcast.com, and select shop at the top. And all of that support that we receive financially goes directly to our amazing editing team and making sure we're bringing you the highest quality content you can get. Thank you. And let's go back to the episode. I have other questions, but I want to know if anyone in the audience wants to come up and ask a question, share a comment, or a thought, or how this is landing with you. Come on up.
Hi.
How you doing, sir?
Hi.
Estes Banks. I played at CU in the 60s.
Oh, great.
Thing that I'd like to talk about is Tommy Smith. I played with him in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So when Tommy came back from the '68 Olympics, he told us a wonderful story, and the story really was, there's a backstory, and the backstory was there was a guy by the name of Harry Edwards.
Dr. Harry Edwards, yep.
Okay, who had come to him, and Tommy was at San Jose State, and he went with John Carlos and a whole bunch of other guys, and he got them together, and they boycotted.
Yep.
Harry came to us when I was playing for the Oakland Raiders, and he asked us to boycott.
Okay.
We couldn't, and there was a reason for that. The National Football League at that point was on quotas for black players.
Yep.
People don't understand that. Our quota at the Oakland Raiders was 12. Now our roster was 40. Every team had a different number.
Yep.
There's a player in Denver's Ring of Fame, Lionel Taylor, who's one of my very, very good friends, who played with Chicago Bears in the 50s. Chicago Bears quota was 4. Lionel made the team. Mm-hmm. First year. Second year, he was number 5. He got cut. So he came to the Denver Broncos, and he made the Ring of Fame.
Yep.
Okay. So This stuff has gone on forever.
Yes.
It is not just Ali who was the man. My heroes were Jim Brown, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell. Those guys stood up. And the reason they could stand up was because they were superstars. The rest of us absolutely could not. But to go back to Tommy, when Tommy was at the stand, and if you see there was Tommy put his right hand up and John put his left.
Because I had one pair of gloves.
That's right, because John forgot his gloves. Now, to go back even farther, what happened was in 1936, Jesse Owens had won 3 gold medals. And the medals were the 100, the 220, and the long jump. Hitler went to Avery Brundage, who was the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee, and he said to Brundage, you have 2 Jewish runners who are on the 440 team. We want them off. We would prefer that blacks beat us versus Jews. So again, this stuff is forever.
Wow.
You come from St. Louis, okay? In St. Louis, there was a wonderful book written by Kurt Flood, and the book is A Well-Paid Slave. And if it weren't for Kurt Flood, these guys wouldn't be being paid. He got rid of the reserve clause. So that's my comment.
Man, thank you.
I love that.
So I'll add to Mr. Banks. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks.
I'll add to that too. So he mentioned the name Dr. Harry Edwards. Dr. Harry Edwards was I would call a early adaptation of like a sports sociologist who, for his career, really kind of caught on specifically for the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City and the Olympic Movement for Human Rights, I think is the official name. He's the same person that advised Colin Kaepernick at the San Francisco 49ers in 2016. So even if you think of that span of 50 years or whatever it is of trying to make sure our athletes have a voice who is looking at their experience as Black athletes and being able to use their platform. And so thank you for calling out Dr. Harry Edwards, because he's a monumental person, and as far as the influences the work that I do. He was my mentor's mentor. And so obviously he influences my work because he influenced my mentor's work. So, but thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And thank you just for bringing in the history. I feel like it's so important to see what's happening right now.
Nothing goes on. There's always a backstory.
There's always a backstory, and we can't just cut it out.
So athletics is just a microcosm of what went on.
Absolutely.
And, I got to know Wilt Chamberlain. He was my hero. I loved him. I actually clothed him. I was a senior VP at a clothing company in New York.
Crazy.
Wilt was one of our ambassadors at a 42-inch inseam, just as an understanding. But I believe that, in this day and age, you guys talk about Michael Jordan, he's this wonderful player. Well, I've never seen a guy average 50 points and 25 rebounds in a season as Wilt did.
Yeah.
He was absolutely the most amazing guy. But you have to understand that the press, the media was controlled by the teams. Yeah. And if you understand that, then you can understand why different guys got different amounts of publicity. So if they would play one Black guy off the other guy. So Bill Russell was the good guy, Wilt Chamberlain was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Amazing.
And
I mean, damn. Yeah, you fucked me up. Thank you, sir. Seriously. Because I'm a Jordan fan. Like everything, this is the mentality to be the greatest. However, now that I'm in social justice the way I am, I don't appreciate the influence that you have. Doesn't match up with the greatness. Because can you imagine if he worked as hard towards social justice as he did towards being the greatest basketball player? That would have been crazy, And so you're right. They do play, especially Black superstars against each other for ratings, just so you can it always has to be an adversary because that'd be too much for all the Black superstars to get together to be on the same page. And it is a distractor.
Divide and conquer.
One of my, I won't say greatest because I don't think it's great, but one of my biggest what ifs, specifically in sport, activism, social justice, is the NBA bubble. For those that aren't aware, after George Floyd was murdered, there were a number of NBA games in the bubble that were canceled. And I think guys were very close to sitting the rest of the season. And I think about the impact that would have had if collectively NBA players would have said, we're not playing no more the rest of this year until this stuff gets...
Yeah.
That is...
Don't say it, man.
Proximity to power.
Yeah, proximity to power. It's real.
Come on.
Thank you. This is quite interesting.
Thank you.
So my question is, what is your take on professional athletes becoming coaches at HBCUs? And how do you think that that's going to impact the PWI schools?
Yeah. My take, first of all, is, it's going to sound funny, but man, if people offering you jobs, like you should take them. I mean, not any job, right? But like head coaching jobs are very hard to come by. So I'm of the mindset that if that's a goal of yours and somebody offers it to you and it makes sense, you should take it. So I'll start there. But secondly, I think the benefit of it is HBCUs have been seen as lesser than for way too long, athletically, academically, all these things, right? And I hate that this is because it's not a fact. I hate that this is my opinion, but my opinion is if you're bringing in a Deion Sanders, Eddie George, Michael Vick, etc., that it elevates the level of what those HBCUs can do, and it elevates the necessary attention for them to get the dollars that they deserve. That's my initial thought. And so I do think that coaches should target HBCUs as opportunities. What I don't like and don't agree with is using them as stepping stones, because I think that's what happens pretty consistently is like, I'm going to start here and jump somewhere else. I would hope that we one day don't get to that, to where it becomes a consistent thing, to where people don't stay at HBCUs. And hopefully we get the opportunity that it's just, you pick your flavor. If that's where you want to be, cool, build it up and sustain it, compared to let me build it up and dip out. But I also know some people have different goals. Some people don't want to be at HBCUs. They just do it because that's the circumstance, right? And I would wish in those situations that HBCUs wouldn't be their only option, that they actually could get to a PWI, a Power 4, whatever it is.
What's a PWI?
Public white institution.
Oh.
Or predominantly white institution. Yeah.
Okay.
I would hope that they can actually take that pathway, if that's what they want to go, to start as an assistant coach or a GA and kind of work up that way. But we know that doesn't always work either. So sometimes people just got to work with what they got. And it just so happens that HBCUs open the door for them. I just hope that they don't close it on the way out.
Nice.
Just to follow up on that, do you think then that the athletes, the young people coming out of high school who are great, are going to now have more options and how that might impact recruiting of the top talent? Yeah,
I think yes. I think specifically when you look at things like NIL, where athletes can actually earn money off their name, image, likeness, I think the pathway to HBCUs should be more open now. Because originally the conversation was, well, HBCUs aren't resourced the same. So I need to go to the bigger schools because they have better coaching, they have more money, et cetera, right? If I'm, if I'm AJ, what is it, DeBonsa? I don't know his last name, but he's the number 1 recruit for the class of 2025. He's going to BYU. If I'm him, I could go anywhere for a year and I will still make money off my name, image, and likeness, because I can go and earn those dollars by signing a deal with Gatorade, Nike, whoever it is, right? So I do think, because we're in an era where athletes actually can monetize their name, image, and likeness, that we, in theory, hopefully should see more athletes who are willing to go to HBCUs, because now they can earn the money on their own name compared to being relying on the school to give them a bigger scholarship check, right? Now, are we actually going to see that? I don't know. I would hope that companies would be willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is and really support athletes now that NIL actually exists above ground. But we should see more of it, and I hope we see more of it too.
Any other comments or questions from folks? Or reflections, things that are coming up as you're sitting here?
My name is Glenda Strong Robinson. We have an exhibit going on here, proclaiming Colorado's Black history. Mr. Banks, I've done his oral history. There's history living here,
Absolutely.
I guess, is what I want to say. How and what is CU doing to connect with this history? Especially, we have a lot of athletes from the 60s. I'm from the 60s too. And I was in the last march with Dr. Martin Luther King, March 28th, 1968, the I Am a Man March. How and what are we going to do to let people know? Because we're all standing on shoulders of people who've paid these prices before you got here. And before I got here, actually. So, and a thing that really was on my mind since I've been doing the oral histories here is there are very few young Black kids in the St. Vrain Valley School District as well as the Boulder Valley School District. Surely someone could have had the few people here meet Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter.
Absolutely.
That was always my dream and my goal. How do we make that happen? That's all I want to say.
Gotcha. So I'll answer your second part first and then go to the first part. The how to make that happen first is I think there needs to be more direct contact of somebody who is looking explicitly at those things, right? Because I'll even say for myself, I work with every team. I would say every athlete, but that's not true. On paper, I work with every athlete, but I don't interact and interface with every athlete, right? But what makes it really hard is if I or somebody else doesn't have the contact with the Travis, a Shador, a Coach Prime, et cetera, to be able to say, hey, it'll be really powerful if you do this. And the way that our athletes are now is, I don't think that there's a lack of interest. I think there's a lack of awareness and really a lack of proximity. That, to me, that's the biggest thing. It's the fact that they don't know or are not connected to the campus or the city to know those types of things. So that's the thing that we got to do a better job of, especially for me as being a leader of my unit, is to make sure that, again, a Travis, a Shador knows, like, hey, we have St. Vrain and Boulder Valley School District that has this minimum amount. It would mean a lot if you go and actually connect with them, right? But the way that our student athletes are, specifically at CU now, the challenges that I see, I think, are bigger than just kind of knowing that lack of awareness or being aware that there's a lack of awareness. Like, the experience for our athletes right now is very isolating, and that kind of perpetuates the problem. We have a good chunk of our athletes who don't even have on-campus classes. Everything they do is online, and they're in a facility to eat, to study, to practice, to work out, to get treatment, and then they go home. And it's like, well, if you're never in the community, it's really hard to kind of get you to do stuff like that, right? Now, I would say specifically for Travis and Shador, part of that was a little bit by design because they kind of get mobbed like everywhere they go. So those two, I think, I have a little bit of a different perspective, a different awareness, but we got to do a better job of that. To your first question of like, what are we doing? I can't say for the university. I know some stuff the university is doing. I can say at least what I try to do and what athletics tries to do is, one, uncover those stories and actually deploy resources to tell them. What I've learned and seen is that we have archived those stories. We can find them in old newsletters, old articles, but I'm a very big component. What I've tried to do since I've been there is to put specifically video resources to these stories so that there's, similar to the museum downstairs, there's an actual footage and oral history of somebody acknowledging this. Because what ends up happening is that articles get lost. And so I try to deploy my resources to say, hey, video department, I've uncovered this story. Can we go record somebody talking about this so that we can actually share it out, right? Now, a lot of what we've done so far since I've been there has been more of the stories of our student athletes. So if you go on our cubus.com or Facebook or X, whatever, right, you'll see a number of our current athletes and then recently graduated, recently finished athletes telling their stories so that we can get that from them now. Because what I've also seen is that once they leave, if their experience wasn't good, we're not getting that, right? And so a lot of what I've tried to focus on is if I know Courtney really well and I know Courtney is getting ready to finish, I'll say, hey, Courtney, remember that thing you was telling me about? You should say it on camera so that we can actually get this and know this is the experience that you had. So 1, we can learn about it. 2, we can appreciate it. But 3, we can use it to say, Courtney had this experience and Courtney was one of our best athletes. How do we make Courtney's experience better? But for the athletes who aren't Courtney, how do we make it even better and make sure they don't deal with X, Y, Z? So just trying to deploy those resources has been something I've been trying my best to do. So
one of the things that I found with CU was that when you graduated, they forgot about it. Mm-hmm. And there was no way that you could be cohesive with them.
Yep.
And I'm a member of the NFL Players Association, Retired Players Association. Those guys are constantly
communicate and talk. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We do not communicate. Now we're starting to. We just started this new thing where we can connect, but it's really hard.
It is.
And the only time we ever connect is when we go to any of the reunions, and the reunions they're so.
Yeah.
To be quite frank.
Yeah.
Okay. So my sense of them is I'll go I'll not go. I don't have a feeling that I have to go.
Right.
And so until CU gets to the point that they tell me and tell my former teammates, that I ran track and I played football at CU, till they tell us that we got to go and there's a reason for us to go.
Yeah. I
guarantee you that the majority won't go.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And the other issue, and I have one other issue, and that is there's got to be some way to get Prime involved with us.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't get involved with us, we're not going to open up our wallet.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say specifically to Prime, my experience in working with him has been, it's not the lack of willingness. I think it's the lack of, part of it is lack of time. When you got a TV show and do keynotes and all, that's part of it. But what I think would benefit him and us collectively is really being a lot more intentional with what and who we spend time with here. And I think that will very candidly bust the door open because
he doesn't know who we are.
And that's what I mean. That's what I mean, right? So, and there's those things that we've talked about with our staff, with him, et cetera. We just have to make that step to be like, hey, the TV show you're doing next week, we got to shelve that because there's this thing that's happening in Boulder, in Denver with the Alumni Association that for the betterment of not just football, but for this university, you need to be president. And that's not something that has happened. Mm-hmm. At least not consistently, I would say. But
well, not at all. And I mean, look, one of the first times that we met him, we're sitting in with 500 guys waiting. We can't wait to meet this dude.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't care, to be honest, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met thousands of people, so it doesn't matter. So the bottom line is, comes into a room, he goes around, and he shakes hands, and he leaves. There's $500 million sitting in the room. Yeah. And all he has to do is shake some hands and ask us to get involved.
To get involved.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's a major miss.
Yeah. I'll pass that on too.
Please.
So thank you.
And if he wants to be interviewed on a podcast,
I'll pass that on too. Yes. Yeah.
There you go. I'm sitting with your comment on history and like whose shoulders we're standing on. And I just handed off a book to Courtney. It's called Master, Slave, Husband, Wife. And it's recounting kind of in the 1850s. And there's a lot about the abolitionists, both Black and white. And there is something so energizing about remembering who did this work before you, and so supportive and so, I guess like just feeling like someone has your back and they've been fighting this fight, and to make it more visible. I'm just now realizing why that book was so impactful. It was like, oh wow, yeah, this is a lineage. And so I appreciate your reminder about the history. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our time. You have a long drive ahead of you.
I do.
He's driving to St. Louis tonight.
Gotta make it home for. This will be the first time my daughter's home for Easter, like St. Louis home. So
sweet.
Yeah, we're prioritizing it.
I love that.
I did, and I hope this is not. I did have a kind of wrap-up question. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like a nice wrap-up for this series as well. In your time at CU, have you noticed a change with Black culture, Black experience? Like, I know the turnover rate is super high for professors.
Yeah.
How, I don't know anything that's happening on campus. I've lived here for 20 years. Yeah. I have no idea. Like, what's your finger on the pulse of like, what's happening?
Have things changed? Yes and no. I didn't realize, specifically Coach Brian, I didn't realize the energy it would bring. Mm-hmm. That's something that has changed completely in regards of just the interest of people wanting to be involved, right? Because it used to be we would have former players, alums who like, they appreciate Boulder, but they ain't trying to come back to Boulder, right? Now that has changed a little bit, right? Yeah. And so a lot of the conversations that I try to have with our staff that we try to talk about internally is like, y'all, we have an opportunity that we need to seize, because we can change the trajectory of how specifically Black people are not just experiencing Boulder, but how they think about Boulder and how they think about CU. So we need to be a lot more intentional with grabbing that attention and actually doing something with it.
Yeah.
So it's changing the fact that conversation is now happening, because the conversation used to be, well, why ain't nobody coming back? And it's like, well, it's pretty clear why people ain't coming back, because it's kind of racist here. Like that's why people not coming back, right? That's one of the main reasons.
It's true.
Now the difference is like, I'll come back for a game, and it's like, okay, if they gonna be here, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. Like, we need to be doing something like very explicit, right?
There's a crack. You got to put your foot in the door.
There's a crack. We got to put our foot in the door, right? And so that's changed. I will say, from a campus perspective, what I've seen over my 4 years being here has been I don't want to say investment, because I don't think it's there yet. What I have seen, though, is a very, very specific interest of new Black faculty and staff of trying to fix it or trying to make it better. Where there are some staff that I've seen that have come to see you that they're like, they get here and in 6 months they're like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this. I'm leaving. Right. But what I have seen over I would say probably about the last 2 years, is that people coming in, specifically some of the newer Black faculty and staff, they're like, oh, I'm not finna deal with this. I ain't necessarily trying to leave, but I'm telling you, I'm not dealing with this. So we need to do something, and I'm willing to help do something, right? Mm-hmm. So that's been, I think, very different, and it's been very refreshing for me to see.
Yeah.
Because the conversations I used to have with people in my office are like, I got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And now it's, hey, we got to change this thing. And that, to me, that's
a really big difference.
That is a very big difference.
That's really insightful.
The numbers have shifted a little bit. A lot of that's through football, just be totally honest. Their staff is real black. So the numbers have changed. So that helps a little bit.
Just how black?
If you, like I said, talking sheer numbers, like athletics, our numbers are booming compared to what they used to be. But
I love that.
Yeah.
And that helps a little bit too, just from like a cultural perspective and seeing people in the hallway and that, right? So like I can speak to that. That's been super helpful. But just again, the mindset shift of the new people coming in of like, and I don't know if it's the specific type of people. I don't know if it's because of where they came from. I don't know if it's a change of the times. I don't know exactly what it is. I know for me, I think for me, it's a little different because this is the work I signed up to do. So I tell a lot of our students and staff, like, I already know I'm fighting problems that have existed for hundreds of years. It's probably not going to fix tomorrow. Like, right. I'm well aware of that.
It's a marathon.
But that doesn't mean I can't give my effort to it. And I kind of signed up for that. So, I'm cool with kind of the inch and slow progress. And hopefully we get to the point that, in the next 2-4 years, however long it is, because I said I've been here 4, but the last 2 has been a shift. Hopefully 2 years from now, the conversation isn't how we changing it. It's how do we sustain it? Or, hey, we've seen some strides. How do we, kick the door open type of thing? How do we actually
scale
open it? Right? How do we scale it? Right. And there's been some things that I've seen just from, like I said, faculty, friends, close colleagues of mine to where, for example, now I know for a fact we've had affinity groups at CU before. But now they're actually sponsored at the university level, right? So now there's money that's going into, for example, Black at CU, which is the affinity group for Black faculty and staff on campus, where they now have a budget to run programs and to do meet and greets and to do holiday parties. Whereas in the past, we didn't have a budget for that, right? It wasn't a part of the university. It was somebody saying, we need to get everybody together and pay for it, right?
But now, having that backing is totally
different.
Exactly,
right? So that's been helpful, again, just to kind of see some of those things from an investment level, interest level, all those types of things. So, yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, bro, thank you for signing up for that heavy lift of bridging your. Oh, you got a question? Oh, you telling me to shut the fuck up? Okay. Cool. Cool.
I was really itching as I know that you're wrapping up, and I'm not trying to keep you from St. Louis, but I just want to thank you, DaWon, for the work that you're doing and that you've done, and Cordy and Emily for having these conversations, having them here, and trusting us at the museum with just the privilege of being able to witness these beautiful conversations. And I also just really wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge Nyasha James Davis, who put all of the steps in place to make this happen while she's here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can't go after that, so appreciate it. I think we wrap it up. Yes. Thank you guys for coming out. Seriously, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us as we try to delve into these, not hard conversations, but I think necessary and needed conversations. A great way to wrap up this series, man. Thank you so much for the work you do. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Humanized. Please remember to like and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Join us on Instagram or Facebook to continue this conversation at the Humanized Podcast.
Let us know if you want to learn more about the professional trainings we offer. And of course, tune in next time as we continue the work. Thank you and much love.